The world's two largest economies, the United States and China, are both struggling. Shanghai's business activity was halted for several weeks and has been described as catastrophic. There has been a lot of talk in recent weeks about China's collapsing economy, the destruction of their $7 trillion property market, and the impact that is about to be felt throughout the remainder of the world. We've discussed those topics twice and demonstrated how severely their markets are about to be impacted. And based on our research, we can see that there are some significant global repercussions that are not being discussed, and it is worth noting, bringing it to your attention because it has already begun to happen. Europe, for instance, is facing a complete oil shutdown as its currency falls to its lowest point in 20 years. Global inflation is at its highest level in decades, and tighter monetary policies continue to threaten to cause a global recession. And the times ahead would be vastly different from those we've known in our lifetime. So, in an attempt to break this down and get to the truth about what's really going on, let's talk about what's going on, what this means for the entire global economy, whether or not it's as bad as people say it will be, and what you could do about it to generate profits, or, depending on how you look at it, at least not lose money. When we talk about global recession, you must first realize what is causing it, or who is to blame, and we have the term globalization to do so. Even though each country has its own currency, economic system, and supply of services and goods, it becomes progressively beneficial over time to broaden those services overseas and link themselves to the country with which they do business. This enables them to acquire a competitive advantage by manufacturing overseas, purchasing low-cost materials, and having access to a completely new demographic to increase profits. For example, more than 50% of Facebook's profits come from outside the United States. Also outside of the United States, Apple generates 67% of its revenue, and Tesla generates 25% of its revenue from China alone. However, there is a slight catch. On the one hand, this enables the creation of new jobs, innovative ideas, and an elevated standard of living throughout the world. Not to mention that without exporting jobs, the cost of a smartphone in the US would be $600 higher, and garments would sell for 2 to 4 times their present retail price. However, because we are so interconnected around the world, an economic downturn in one country could cause a domino effect throughout another, and another, and another, and so on, until we all experience a global recession, as we are starting to see today. So what is going on, and how will it affect everyone watching? It's not just a single country or a single event that's to blame, but rather a confluence of factors all occurring at the same time. And we should start with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Despite the fact that the global situation is extremely complex, the invasion ultimately resulted in a sudden increase in commodity prices such as oil and gas, as production was interrupted. In addition, other resource exports were impacted, including nickel, aluminum, and wheat, all of which Russia is a major producer of. However, according to Reuters, over 90% of US semiconductor-grade neon materials come from Ukraine, while 35% of US palladium is obtained from Russia. This means that the production of computer chips and semiconductors has become even more constrained. After all, these chips are integrated into everything, including cars, phones, computers, video games, all other kinds of electronics, solar panels, and pretty much anything else that has a computer. And it's partly to blame for the skyrocketing costs of so many items we use every day, which, of course, leads to even more inflation. After all, gasoline accounts for a significant portion of the consumer price index. And if oil prices continue to rise because of international tensions, this will be reflected in our own inflation figures as well as global inflation. The same is true for chip shortages originating in Russia and Ukraine, with used car prices serving as a perfect example year over year. Automobile prices have risen nearly 40% as a result of workforce, resource, and supply chain bottlenecks. They went back up just as they were about to come down. Finally, higher interest rates. In order to combat inflation, the US raised interest rates way faster than the rest of the world, causing other countries to hold US dollars as a safe store of value. However, as the value of the US dollar rose due to oversupply, it became more pricey for other countries to exchange those dollars, pushing them to print more of their own currency to pay for the more expensive items, because of increased demand for the US dollar because of higher inflation. However, this is only one piece of the puzzle. The following topic is one that has recently gained a lot of attention: China. They are one of the world's most powerful economies, producing 20% of the items we all use on a daily basis, and are currently facing a complete economic meltdown. Despite the fact that we could highlight restricted policies, shady business practices, and an absence of regulation, there are three major elements that have contributed to a global slowdown. First, the implications of a zero-COVID policy. This literally means there is zero tolerance for the spread of COVID, to the point where China continues to impose strict lockdowns, maintain harsh regulations, and do everything in their power to keep their population from being exposed to the virus. However, their economy is expected to suffer as a result. Manufacturing is slowing, supply chains have been severely impacted by a shipping logjam, and growth is now expected to be non-existent. But if that wasn't enough, we have more. China's real estate market is powered by excessive assumptions, lies and deceit, and little to no oversight. Many of China's leading real estate developers have declared bankruptcy, abandoning citizens to fend for themselves or take action by starting nationwide mortgage boycotts. Despite the fact that it began with the property behemoth Evergrande, which is over $300 billion in debt, within 4 weeks, more than 320 developments in about 100 cities were experiencing similar protests, roiling markets, and pushing authorities to corral banks and builders to defuse the uproar. Despite the fact that this has no direct correlation to the US housing market, many large institutions have increased their investment in China over the last 10 years. Furthermore, China owns nearly $1 trillion in US Treasury bonds. As a result, if they sell to raise funds for their own economy, demand for those treasuries will fall significantly. Finally, in third place, we have production. According to the New York Post, the Chinese slowdown will likely result in fewer US exports, resulting in less demand, less consumption, and a further steady decline throughout the international economy. It has even been stated that China will fall far short of its yearly economic growth target of 5%. And we're quickly realizing that the days of China's exponential economic rise are over. However, in terms of what we are dealing with right now and how it may lead to a global recession, we must be cautious. So let's discuss what is going on right now. In terms of what is currently happening, global inflation is a major issue, with several countries experiencing double-digit significant increases year over year. As a result, families must pay more for products and services. As a result, there is less money available to pay for everything else, pushing back demand, growth, and production at a faster rate than anyone could have predicted. For example, Italy and Germany, two of Europe's largest economies, are already showing signs of a recession. It has also been discovered that this southward trend is already as bad as it was during the 2008 financial crisis. And this data does not yet reflect the current increase in energy prices, which is expected to put even more strain on both individuals and businesses. As a result, the euro has fallen below the value of the US dollar for the first time in 20 years, as investors fear that the rising prices of commodities will cause demand to fall even further. In terms of the United States, it is said that every quarter since 1955, the US economy has experienced a recession within 2 years of inflation exceeding 4% and unemployment falling below 5%, as they are now. So, on a very simplified scale, here's what you need to know about and how it's going to impact you and your money and ultimately the global economy. It's easy to see how one collapsing economy could affect another's demand while raising another's costs and causing a domino effect throughout the rest of the world. Higher energy costs lead to higher inflation, which causes a rise in interest rates, which drives down demand, which raises supply chain shocks. And before you know it, we're in a global recession. Based on what's going on now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that China's downtrend growth will result in fewer US exports, less global investment, and lower profits for the companies in which we invest in. However, resolving the problem is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Most importantly, it will mostly act as a reminder that each country will need to adapt. To avoid future supply problems, they have the alternative choice of producing their own raw materials in-house. However, the most likely scenario appears to be that both the US and the Eurozone experience near zero growth next year, with negative knock-on effects all throughout the rest of the world. That is, the economy will need to calm down before it can accelerate forward. But for the time being, it's probably best to cut back on your spending. Keep a strict budget, save as much money as you can, invest as usual, and remain employed. Because we will almost certainly have to wait for these constraints to improve before the economy can resume growth. and hopefully by then, it will be in a way that benefits everyone. That's all we have for today. If you'd enjoyed the video, why don't you give us a like and subscribe to our finance channel? Don't forget to hit the bell button below to get notifications on when we'd post next. Thank you for staying till the end of the video and hope you enjoyed. See you next time.